to come, but let's just start it. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. And I have searched on the internet to look at the various interesting things you've done. As a lawyer, you've almost become an official historian, somebody who is very comfortable with reconstructing the history of a people. But my main focus is your method. How, because everybody talks about the research you do and the extent at which you go, that you even wrote the slave ship called Jesus in a year, which is very fascinating. But could you take us through your process? I know people have asked you about your inspiration. I'll leave that for a while. What I'm interested in really for now is your process of research, where you go, the materials that are possible, things that give you that light at the end of a tunnel that actually turns to be a real substance.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the question. I think it starts with my, I guess, training as a lawyer, especially as a trial lawyer. I am used to interrogating evidence. And that's your starting point for research. If a lawyer gets a case, we weren't there when these events happened. And so you need to establish the facts. And that requires critical examination of the evidence, including possibly statements that your clients are presenting, and also the opponents are presenting, critically review them, and join the dots. Through the whole process of a trial, you're reconstructing history on the basis that you weren't there. An extension of that, you then go and read the relevant cases. Well, that's like any form of research. You have to have the reasoning process to identify what is relevant and what is not relevant, because there are so many cases out there. Likewise, in the course of writing a work of history, there's so many books and there's so many sources out there. So it's an elimination process to determine what needs to be read, in what detail, and then you start the process of assembling your own narrative of those events, just like a judge does. The judge, after hearing the evidence on both sides, will then write a judgment, and in that judgment, it will set out the facts such that you can make sense of the conclusions that he or she will come to. And so if you pick up any judgment, it will set out the story as a judge sees it, based on the evidence that is heard from both sides. And that's exactly my approach as far as my approach to writing my works of history. I know that people have spoken. I was not there. I will review what has been written critically, applying my own thoughts, processes to separate the wheat from the chaff, and then having distilled that information, I will set it out in an organized way, telling effectively the story like that judge, say, this is what happened. And it may be very different for what witnesses came to court to say, I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, but somewhere along the lines, there's a lie in there. And so that's my approach to writing history.
So let's start from day one. You've talked about sources, and I like the analogy, the extensive analogy of what the legal profession does in the reconstruction of stories of things that they did not witness. Now, for me, could you, if it's not revealing the trade of your, the secret of your trade, I would like you to lay out for me the sources you start with, and then the next one, and the whole business of triangulation. Okay, I hear you that sometimes you read books, So meaning that there are books on slavery. You probably want to share one or two of those that you have read. And do you rely on Uncle Google, or do you rely on the AI generators that we have now? How do you navigate this forest of 1,000 information or stories?
Well, I guess it starts like this. I don't, from the outset, set out to write a history of any particular episode. I'm really just educating myself because law is what I read, law is what I practice, but history is my passion. And so I simply read the books out of interest, books that come to my attention. So, for example, when I was writing A Fatherless People, which is the history of Nigeria, the first book that I read was Samuel Johnson's The History of the Yoruba, because as a Yoruba man who had spent most of his life outside of Yoruba land, I wanted to acquaint myself with that story to get an understanding. And in the process of reading that, there will be issues that jump up, and that may now cause me to read another book. Perhaps it's a book that was listed in the footnotes or the endnotes that I've taken a particular interest in. Again, still at that point, I'm not thinking of writing the history of Nigeria. But like any journey, one step after another, you then get to a point where you begin to see a picture and say that there's a story here that needs to be told. And that story is coming out of for the slave ship called Jesus, I read 80 books of different varieties, some about the history of England, the Tudor England, because that's when their entry into the slave trade began. Maybe I had read a book. In fact, it's not maybe, I had read a book about the Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment in Europe and America. And in the process, when I read books, I do mark the books and such that when I'm going back now as a storyteller, a historian, I can fast track to my references and begin to paint that picture. And it's the picture that forms. There comes a point when you say there's a story here that needs to be told. And rather than everybody having to read 80 or 100 books that I've read, having read them, I would now put that story together. So rather than the reader having to follow exactly my journey, they simply follow my story. And if they have a special interest in any episode or any issue that I've mentioned, the books that I've read are all listed at the back of the book, the bibliography, and they can simply follow up and take it in their own direction.
Okay, so you've I mean, 80 books, that's a lot. Apart from books, what other sources do you use? Are there archival materials in the British Library, for instance, that can give us the sense of those 400 people that were taken by John Hendricks? I guess that's his name.
John Hawkins.
John Hawkins, who went to Sierra Leone. Is it possible to find the description, the names, the identities of these 400 people that he captured in Sierra Leone, for instance?
Well, one thing about the Europeans in general and the British in particular is that they do keep records of almost everything. And if you're sufficiently interested in the detail of any particular matter, then it is possible to go down to the various libraries, and they have so many libraries in England in particular, Britain in general, whether it's from London, you go down to the British Library, or you go to Oxford and you've got the Bodleian Library. So they're libraries upon libraries. And if you're one who wants to go deeper, then those are places you can go to. They also have their National Archives, which is an online record, such that any particular piece of information that you need, you're able to make contact with them. And like good librarians, they will source the material that you're looking for you and simply email it. So for example, I needed, on the new work that I'm working on, I wanted a map of the Niger company territories in Nigeria that were bought by the British government in 1899, when Nigeria was effectively named. It was a purchase contract between the British government and the Royal Niger Company. I wanted to know and understand exactly how much territory within what we now know as Nigeria, how much of that land space belonged to the Royal Niger Company, and which was the subject of that contract of sale, for which they received from the British government something like about £860,000. I simply contacted the National Archives and asked them for that map, and it was emailed across to me. Obviously for a fee, nothing comes for nothing, but this age that we live in, there's so much information that is out there. In the days of old, you used to have to physically go down to a library, sit there with perhaps with the assistance of a knowledgeable librarian, and work your way through the books. These days, you don't actually need to leave your study, and most of the 80 books, in fact, all of the 80 books that I read for Slave Ship, it was the same number for A Fatherless People, were all read in this My Study, and with Amazon there for you to order your books. So it was during lockdown that I actually wrote A Slave Ship Called Jesus. I was able to write it in the space of about 3 months because we were all locked in, and the information is there locked in with you. Technically, you've got your library, you've got your internet, and you've got your facility to place orders for books that you don't have or for materials that you don't have. So now the future belongs, or this age and the future belongs to those who know how to manage information. It's not a question of really gifting, searching for the information. It's almost on tap. It's now a question of what you do with the information that you've got, how you package it, how you arrange it for the benefits of those you want to reach.
Okay, I'm getting a good picture now. So let me zero in on the ships, the ships that carried enslaved people. One is clear. You have told us about the ship named Jesus, but I also know that in the process of your research, you came across other ships. I would want you to briefly either drop their names or briefly describe these ships that carried people, because it will be a very good entry point to go and find out who was on it, how were they treated, and where did they land. And because most of the ships, according to what you've said, always carry a manifest, sort of the cargo and the people that were on it. Could you just give a quick rundown for me, as somebody who is totally new to this, the ships, if you have a list of them, or if you have some you can just reel off from the top of your head, like the one named Jesus, which was owned by the Queen of England. I would like to know some of those ships that you encountered.
Well, I wasn't really greatly interested in the number of the ships. I was only struck by the names. So once I had seen the pattern, I didn't need to go looking for how many more names are out there. The ones that struck me were the Jesus of Lubeck. And then when I realized that there was a pattern in terms of using religious names for these ships, was when I also came across the grace of God as the name of a ship. And so that's when the point dropped with me to say, what is going on here? Why are these ships engaged in this evil enterprise? Why are they carrying biblical Christian connotations? I was more interested in the why rather than how many more of them. So they are, if you even go back to Christopher Columbus's ship, the Saint Maria. So this was a pattern that was forming in terms of these ships of adventure, ships in the case of the slave trade in particular, ships engage in this evil enterprise. And what really struck me in the case of the Jesus of Lubeck, which inspired the title of the book, A Slave Ship Called Jesus, was the fact that I knew that that was owned by not just the British royal family, the Queen of England. What was more significant was the fact that she was the head of the Church of England. And so here's the head of the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Of the collection of ships that she has at her disposal, she's contributing the one bearing the name of Jesus to this enterprise, to this wicked enterprise. Now, that struck me. You're not just the Queen of England. You are also the head of the Church of England. And it's like the Pope having a ship named after God or Jesus or Moses, if you like, and that is being deployed in the slave trade.
The grace of God, is there anything else that you found out about the grace of God? That ship that was named the grace of God. What?
As I said, I wasn't particularly interested beyond the fact of the signals that I was picking up about what was going on in this trade. I only needed, I mean, you then go to the fact that some of the slavers were, even whilst they were engaged in the trade, were the one writing songs that you and I sing in church today.
Amazing Grace, for example.
Amazing Grace, and how sweet the name of Jesus is. And yet, at the point that those songs, hymns were written, they were still active in the trade. Now, so it's that, it is that contradiction that really inspired the work that I was doing.
Well, there's always this thing we always ask after an event has happened, that if you cast a backward glance to when you started, are there things you wish you knew then that you know now, in terms of the organization of information, the search for the information? Because it's a journey, you've gone through a journey, you must have picked up one or two things along the way that you wish you probably knew at the beginning, in terms of from data to publication, all of those 80 books, the libraries and stuff. What is it that you could share with somebody who is interested, for instance, in finding out, which is research?
Well, you know, as I said, there's so much information out there. If you wait to read everything that is out there, you'll never get a book written. It's as simple as that. You read as much as you need to. Once, as I said, the story is formed, and I've done thorough enough research, given the scope of what I wish to write about, then you go ahead and produce the book. Now, obviously, more information will become available as the days and years pass by. There are new books that I've read. There's new information that is becoming available almost daily as we understand this world better. And all you can do with that is use that for a later edition of the book. You cannot put everything in the first shot, but you make sure that what you're producing now is well researched, which was my objective, and also well written from the perspective of the reader. And the results so far that those boxes have been ticked.
Well, before I let you go, before this is concluded, it would just be it would be an icing on the cake if you can open the book. I guess you have one very close by, and take an excerpt that when you read it yourself, it touches you. It sends you into that imaginary space of how human beings could do this kind of thing to other human beings. I know you've read places where you debunk the story that Africans were always fighting themselves, and that was not exactly the case. But is there any passage that when you read it again, it touches you personally? And if you can read that to us and then tell us why it touches you.
All right, well, give me a second. Let me find the passage. Okay, well, this is an interesting passage. Let me give you context. The uprising, which in Haiti, led by Toussaint Louverture, had taken place, and Toussaint had abolished slavery, and he was the one that abolished it. You know, forget the narrative. That's the common narrative that it was them who abolished it for moral reasons and moral turnaround. That abolition, their abolition, post-dated the abolition of slavery by the Africans in Haiti after they effectively overthrew their enslavers. They shed and lost lives, blood, limbs in order to achieve that victory. And that uprising then inspired events in other parts of the slavery estates, and in particular Jamaica. And there's a passage titled or subtitled "Fire on the Mountain," and this is describing and explaining the uprising in Jamaica that followed. The plan had been for the start of the revolution to be signaled by a chain of fires on hilltop plantations. The first fire was sighted at 9 p.m. on the night of 27th December 1831. It's a quotation. The congregation which had assembled was dispersing in affright and would not return to my call. The only answer that could be got was, "Palmyra on fire." It was not an ordinary estate fire they spoke of. It was the preconcerted signal for our part of the country that the struggle for freedom had begun. It was a response to Kensington on fire, another sugar estate high up on a mountain towards the interior. Both were visible to each other, and over a great stretch of intermediate country, the one hoisted the flaming flag of liberty, and the other saluted it, calling on all between and around to follow the example, and it was followed. There were grand beacon fires. Scarcely had night closed in when the sky towards the interior was illuminated by unwanted glares, as fires rose here and there in rapid succession. Martial law was declared on the island on 30th of December 1831. All members of the militia were called up, and troops and Marines arrived at Montego Bay on New Year's Day 1832 with rockets and other artillery. This was a war with high stakes, as the British could not afford another defeat to an army of enslaved Africans, as had happened in Haiti, especially given the ongoing forward planning for the colonization of Africa. On 2nd of January, the commanding officer of the British Army issued his proclamation. To the rebellious slaves, Negroes, you have taken up arms against your masters and have burnt and plundered their houses and buildings. Some wicked persons have told you that the king has made you free and that your masters withhold your freedom from you. In the name of the king, I come amongst you to tell you that you are misled. I bring with me numerous forces to punish the guilty, and all who are found with the rebels will be put to death without mercy. You cannot resist the king's troops. Surrender yourselves and beg that your crime may be pardoned. All who yield themselves up at any military post immediately, provided that they are not principals or chiefs in the burnings that have been committed, will receive His Majesty's gracious pardon. All who hold out will meet certain deaths. Willoughby Cotton, Major General commanding, God save the king. Still, the Africans did not relent. Arms they had none, nor scarcely any who knew the use of them. But desperate resolution, when every hope is at stake, supplies for a while the want of arms. These words have been written of the storming of the Bastille, but they are arguably more apt to describe the position of Sharpe's men. The Spectator magazine of March the 10th, 1832, gives a sense of the impact of the war on the national discourse back in Britain. We believe the West Indian planters' fate is coming like a thief in the night. The mock insurrections of the Negroes will at length be converted into a real insurrection. The planters have blustered for several years about casting off the mother country and all that. They had forgotten that sedition is catching. It is easy to tell the whites of England that they are sharers in the crime of which colonial slavery is the fruit, that they have sanctioned by centuries of permission and by volumes of laws the right of the master over his Negro. We grant all this. But what signifies such recriminations? The legislature of England will never perhaps destroy the planters in order to free the Negro, but it should be mere dreaming to doubt that one day, and that not very distant, the unconciliated Negro will destroy the planters in order to emancipate himself. Through the combination of the revolution in Haiti and the uprisings in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, the Africans had made the continuation of slavery untenable.
Wow. Why did you decide on this passage?
Well, it's an interesting passage because it adjusts the narrative about how the slave trade came to end. The narrative that we've been taught, that's been pushed and propagated, was that slavery was abolished because of a sudden moral turnaround, or because the alternative rationalization is that it ceased to be profitable. The passage demonstrates that that was not, neither of those explanations is correct. That the Africans, first in Haiti and then in Jamaica, quite aside from the other uprisings, were prepared to lay their lives on the line in order to force the change that they desired. And it's a lesson to the modern generation of Africans who've been led to believe that Africans never stand up and fight for anything, and that they will suffer any condition in perpetuity. Haiti, Jamaica, and all the other places, when the odds against them were even greater, they were prepared to fight to the death in order to get what belonged to them, which is freedom. And the passage also highlights the resistance that was still in force on the side of the slavers. They weren't ready to roll over and give this thing up. They were ready to kill, and they did kill mercilessly. They had to be ruthless in order to try and deter further uprisings. But at the end of the day, the Africans came through, and it was that forced the abolition, which then followed in 1807 of the slave trade, and then later of slavery itself in 1833 on the part of the British. So that's why that passage does stand out for me.
From your explanation, you bring me to remembrance of Chinua Achebe's story that when elephants begin to tell their own stories of how many hunters they have killed, the whole narrative would change. And I think you've more than demonstrated that Africans were not just passive, they did everything within their power to resist their oppressors. I just want to thank you very much for this labor of love that you've done, and for the opportunity to at least and I know that there are many more that will come from where these ones have come, the fatherless people, a slave ship called Jesus. I don't know what the next title will be, but I am very sure that it will be as rich and enriching as the ones you have done. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope it will be possible to always call on you when we have the opportunity to throw some more light on issues like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.